Hello, thank you everybody for joining us on the self-custody panel. So just super quick intros, just take 10, 20 seconds, each of you guys give a quick intro on yourselves and then we'll get into it.
Okay. Hi, I am Owen Kemeys. I am head of physical design at Foundation Devices. We make hardware wallets, including our new product, Passport Prime, here, which you can come and see me about later on if you want to look at it.
Yeah. JP?
Yeah, hi guys, I'm JP. I host and was a co-founder of the Bitcoin Sydney meetup. In fact, way back in 2018, Stefan and I were co-founders and co-hosts of that.
Microphone, yep.
And ever since then, we've been putting on monthly and even more recently, fortnightly events in Sydney that brings the entire Bitcoin community together, as well as help new people understand and get into Bitcoin.
Yeah, and for people who don't know me, my name is Stefan Levera. I host Stefan Levera podcast. I've been shouting from the rooftops about Bitcoin for a while now, since 2013, but I started my podcast in 2018, trying to help interview people so they can, so that listeners can learn about Bitcoin. So we're going to be talking about self-custody today. So first, kind of off the bat question, I want to just get a sense from the audience here. Hands up if you know how to self-custody using a phone wallet. Hands up if you know how to do that. Okay, so I'm gonna ballpark that at 30% of the audience here. Now, hands up, how many of you know how to use a Bitcoin hardware wallet? Hands up if you know how to use a Bitcoin hardware wallet. Okay, so that's pretty similar, about 30%. So, that means about 70% of you presumably don't know how to do that. So let's start with why. Why is self-custody important? Why should we even bother doing that?
So many reasons. The first thing, of course, is that the whole purpose of Bitcoin was to have your money as a bearer asset that does not require you to trust anybody else. We're trying to get away from this idea that you need to have an intermediary, because the whole history of money, is Satoshi literally embedded in the Bitcoin Genesis block, is full of repeated breaches of the trust when you involve third parties in your money. There's also a great deal of history in people that have, even in Bitcoin, left their trust in an institution, because what I suspect most people do is they buy Bitcoin and they think they own Bitcoin because they've bought some Bitcoin and they have it in their exchange account on whatever exchange it is they're using. But in reality, all you have in that circumstance is an IOU with the exchange. And should the exchange collapse, as many have done, you are left as nothing more than an unsecured creditor of a failed organisation. And so we can go back in history. The first major catastrophe was in the Bitcoin space. Well, there were others before that, but I think the most well-known one that really hit the media was an entity called Mt. Gox, or Mount Gox as it's sometimes known. And that literally involved, I think it was something like 1 million Bitcoins went missing.
In that range,
to that effect. Massive chunk of the Bitcoin supply. And, it took years and years and years for people to get sort of any of that back, such that they did, and it hung as a bad smell over the whole Bitcoin ecosystem, and it was constantly used as something that Bitcoin critics attacked Bitcoin for, even though it was nothing to do with Bitcoin. It was people essentially, because we have this expression, not your keys, not your coins. So unless you are holding, and we'll go into this in the discussion, your own private keys in some form or another, you do not own the Bitcoin. The other reason why it is better for Bitcoin overall, and therefore better for the status of your own holdings in Bitcoin, is that if exchanges are holding all of the Bitcoin, it becomes essentially something, again, like what we're trying to get away with. There's too much temptation for exchanges to do a thing called fractional reserve. They can fractionally reserve the Bitcoin. So they can have, if they've got something like on their books, they may, and this is exactly what FTX did in the more recent catastrophic crash of an exchange, very high profile. They had, I believe, liabilities for something like, it was almost several hundred thousand Bitcoin.
I don't know the number, but yeah.
Whatever it was a huge number of Bitcoin. But they literally didn't own any Bitcoin.
Interestingly, with FTX, it was encouraged for people to leave their coins there.
And it turned
there
out
were staff of FTX who left their coins on FTX. It was kind of encouraged because they were doing staking and yield and this kind of thing. So
many people thought this is not some 2-bit operation. This was the biggest exchange in the world. And people thought in good faith, they bought Bitcoin and they left it on the platform. And it turned out that when the books were looked at, after the collapse of FTX, they had, as I said, liabilities, I think, for at least 100,000 Bitcoin or thereabouts. You can check out the figure. It doesn't matter exactly what it is. Guess how many Bitcoin they actually really owned, though, that they could redistribute back? 1. They didn't have, so what did that mean? It meant that all of those people that should have been, thought that they were buying Bitcoin and should have actually created demand for Bitcoin and therefore, helped the price of all of the other Bitcoin people had bought, it didn't create any real demand for Bitcoin at all. It was all just paper Bitcoin. And this is exactly why Bitcoin was created, to get away from all of this. You've got this thing, you literally only need to hold information, and with that information, you are able to unlock the spending power of your Bitcoin, which is ultimately, in this, on the Bitcoin blockchain, which is everywhere in the world at once, and spend that money anywhere without asking anyone's permission, without having to trust anybody. And of course, the only thing it asks of you is to take the necessary personal responsibility in learning just a little bit about how to take that custody of the coins yourself.
Owen, let's hear from you.
That's exactly right. So the whole point here is to not be dependent on anybody, to not trust anybody. And if you take custody yourself, you learn how to do that. Think of it as an empowerment thing. You answer to nobody. No one can lock you out. No one can deny you access. No one can say, "Oh, sorry, we've had to freeze your account right now." You are completely sovereign, and that's an important skill and a very rare thing to have in this day and age. That's incomparable to anything apart from maybe a pile of gold coins buried in your basement or something. It's very rare, and it's worth pushing for. It's what all this is about.
So, I guess obviously the topic, self-custody can be easy, right? Now, common, I guess, let's walk through what does it normally look like, and then we'll talk about this question of whether it really is easy or not. So, I guess for people who may not have used a self-custody wallet, what does it look like? Just a typical setup. Let's start with like a typical phone setup, and then a typical hardware setup, just so people get an idea what are they in for here. Do you guys want to talk that through?
I want to know who here has seen a seed phrase. Raise your hand if you have seen a seed phrase at least. Okay, good. So some, but not that many. If you haven't seen a seed phrase, then whatever you're doing is probably not self-custody, because the seed phrase is the unique secret that lets you plug into any different software or hardware application and spend your own money. If you haven't seen one, and even if you're using the world's nicest software wallet on your phone or something, then you don't know for sure if you can actually leave that provider. But if you have a seed phrase, you are independent, and that's the crux of it.
Okay, so yeah, like a typical setup would be, let's say you have a phone wallet, and then you generate a new wallet, or you create a new wallet, and it will usually there will be an option for backup, or it might show you at the start, and you'll write down 12 words. And basically, what matters is you need to write down those 12 words in the correct order. So it's normally 12 or 24, but nowadays it's usually 12. That's what it looks like, typically for a phone self-custodial setup. Now, in the hardware wallet context, it might be similar, but it might display on the screen of the hardware wallet, and then it's important that you write that down, but also it's important that you don't take a picture of it, you don't tell anybody, and also don't just be aware that if somebody comes to you saying, "Hey, I'm from the support company, tell me your 12 words," you don't tell them that, right? It's because that can be a scammer, right?
There's no situation in the world that ever requires anyone other than you to know what those words are.
Yeah, we have to think about that a lot at Foundation, including like wording on the screen of a hardware wallet and things. We had an argument about it internally recently because there are some new scams and things coming out. How do we communicate to our users very simply and in few words in a way that isn't scary? Like, if anyone ever asks you for this, they're probably trying to steal your money. There's no good reason to ever give this to anybody else.
In fact, it shouldn't touch the digital realm in any way whatsoever, as Stefan said. That includes even speaking out the words aloud where it might be able to be overheard or recorded. Even, as Stefan said, we should assume that every one of your computer devices, whether it's a phone or a computer, is inherently insecure. And so what we're doing with Bitcoin securing your own keys is we're bringing cybersecurity in this case, but it's bringing it back into the physical realm. We don't actually want that information in the digital realm at all because it's vulnerable. So what you're actually ultimately doing when you're securing your Bitcoin yourself is you're reverting to something that should actually come quite naturally to human beings, and that is physical security. You're keeping the literal words handwritten down in a very, very safe place.
Now, we're speaking in a kind of, you've got to take it serious. You need to be intense about it. And I understand where maybe when somebody's a bit newer, if you haven't done this yet, it might sound a bit confronting. Like, this is a whole new thing, and, something could go wrong, and I would rather trust a professional. That's a typical way that people might think. But that's, you need to get past that, because remember, when you control those coins yourself, right, you've written down your 12 words, and you keep them yourself, you are really exposing yourself better to the upside of Bitcoin, right? And as, when people bought a certain amount of coin in earlier years and now it's gone up, it becomes serious money pretty quickly. So that's how I would explain it, that I think you have an incentive to take it seriously. So the challenge is for a lot of people when they're new, they don't take it seriously and they're just kind of next, whatever, this, that, and the other, and then they forget, or they sort of don't think it through. So that's probably part of the challenge, is when you're new to Bitcoin, understanding this is something you've got to take serious. So with that in mind, let's try to answer this first question. Can self-custody be easy? Because, we're saying this stuff, but in what way can it be easy? In what way can it be worth it?
It doesn't have to be scary. I understand it's scary when you're first looking at this stuff, but there are lots of other skills in life that we learn that have value in learning them. Learning to drive is a great example, one with that, your life is literally at stake when you drive a car. But many of us learn how to do it and do it quite happily for our entire lives, and there's never any issue at all. You can completely learn this skill. And it's just because it's an unfamiliar concept. Like, we're not used to having to secure information, to secure secrets. We're very used to having logins and forgot passwords and things, but all of that is just offloading all this stuff to someplace else. Like, there is a database somewhere that stores your password. It's just not you anymore, and that means that if they decide to lose it or lock you out or something, then you have no recourse whatsoever. But you can do all of this yourself, and you should do. It's not that hard.
It's also a lot easier to do now. You're very lucky now, and that this sort of thing is a lot easier to do now than it was 10 years ago, when we didn't have, for example, hardware wallets. There are pretty much all hardware wallets now that are on the market will carefully walk you through the procedure of writing down the words, and then from there you can then, once you've got those words written down and secure, you can then safely transfer your coins from your exchange account and onto the wallet address that's generated with the wallet software. I might also add as well that the level of security you employ should reflect perhaps the balance of Bitcoin you've got. Like, if you've got a small amount of Bitcoin, perhaps a phone wallet is sufficient for that. We could quibble on the figures would be, but bear in mind though that what can start out by being a relatively low value amount of Bitcoin, with Bitcoin's appreciation, can rapidly become a significant value of Bitcoin. So always give some forethought as well to not just necessarily what the Bitcoin is worth now, but what it could be worth in the future. So you sort of tend to move from the basic self-custody through a phone, then to the sort of hardware wallets like what we've mentioned, and of course we could perhaps, if we've got time, talk about other even more secure options. But the good news is that all of these things have become far more easier for the average person to step through in a very intuitive, straightforward manner. Back in the day, of course, I think it was all just, literally, I don't think there were even seed words. You just sort of had to write down.
Yeah, pre-seed words. It was like you had to save a file, or there was like a wallet.dat, or people were using like Armory, offline and online wallets. It was just a very different thing. But anyway, I mean, let's not focus as much on early days. I think to focus on, what the value for listeners, either on the stream or audience members. Okay, it's one thing to write down the 12 words. What about things like the process, the life cycle of key management? So things like testing our backups or inheritance. Do you guys want to touch on any of those components of self-custody?
I could go for that. So first of all, the good thing is about holding money in this way is it's possible to essentially, and I don't want to quite touch on multisig yet, although that is very relevant.
Yeah, that's a more advanced conversation.
But it is very
yeah,
relevant
sure,
to the question you asked. But it is possible to, like, you can't photocopy like a $50 note, right? Because it's only that one note. So if you lose that $50 note, well, your money's gone, even though that's the bearer asset, just like Bitcoin is. But with your Bitcoin seed words, you can make multiple copies of that and keep it in multiple secure locations. And again, it's a more advanced topic, but it's also possible to have more than one key such that you need more than one of them brought together in order to spend the money. I think it's important just to point out that if you are storing a greater amount of your money in Bitcoin, as I think if we do believe in Bitcoin, you would probably want to store as much of your money as Bitcoin as possible. You don't want it to be possible for you to spend all your life savings at the drop of a hat, like just in one go. It should be difficult to spend your life savings, because that'll also make it difficult for somebody to take it from you.
Here's a great point there about the backups. So there are a few like steps in your Bitcoin journey of custody that will be really meaningful to you. And one of them, the first one is when you actually take self-custody, you have a seed phrase, you back it up somewhere. The experience of seeing all your Bitcoin in a wallet, deleting the wallet, and then making a new one, maybe even in a different software using the same seed words, and seeing all of your coins just magically back again is like unlike anything else in how to manage finances.
Yeah. So just to explain that, just for people who are new, when you write down those 12 words, you can think of that like it's a representation of your master private key. It's representing that private key. And this private key, once it's, let's say ingested or imported into a different hardware wallet, because they're using the same or similar standards, known as BIP39, BIP32, and so on, different standards. But the point is, you could take the same 12 words into another hardware wallet or into another device, and when you go to actually generate addresses, it'll generate the same addresses, and you will have the same balance. So this is another, I guess, kind of a bit of a mind-bending concept, right? Like, you might be used to this concept. If you're not used to this, you might be thinking, oh, it's like a Word file, and I hit save, and I've saved my transactions. No, this is actually different. When you write down those 12 words, it's not just the backup of the coins you already have received, it's all the future addresses that will be generated on those keys. So it's sort of like you can generate billions of addresses, and the same 12 words is the backup, not just for coins you've received for now, but into the future on that wallet.
Yeah, because
so it's a bit of a kind of a mind. It kind of screws with your mind to think about it if you're not used to that.
Because remember, your transaction history is not actually stored in your wallet. Wallet's almost a misleading term for what it is.
We use wallet in confusing ways sometimes.
Yeah, it's because all of the transaction history that you've ever done is actually on the Bitcoin blockchain. So using only that set of seed words, all of the addresses that you'll ever use are deterministically generated from that. So therefore, they could be deterministically generated again if you get a new wallet. And then all of the transactions on all of those addresses could be easily matched up as they're stored on the Bitcoin blockchain.
It's such a bad term, but it's what we have now, and it's what people are familiar with. But like, okay, it's a wallet, but the coins aren't like in there. The coins are in the internet somewhere, and then this is how I get back to them, and it can be confusing for sure.
Yeah. So I guess the other simplifying way I would try to explain it for people is when you have that master private key, you can generate addresses, and it's done in a deterministic way. So it's like address 0, address 1, address 2, address 3. Kind of, I'm slightly simplifying a bit, but it's enough for you to get the idea. And the idea is when somebody has that address, they can send coins to you, but they cannot take the coins from there. Why? Because they don't have your private key. So your private key that lives inside your, let's say, your hardware wallet or in your phone, allows you to sign a message or sign a transaction that moves the coins on the chain, on the blockchain. So that's kind of, I'm trying to give you some simple ideas that help you understand what's happening in the background. But the key point is obviously keep those 12 words safe and don't show them to anybody and don't put them into any or on any online connected device, right? So I'll give you an example. I don't want to scare you, but I just want you to understand this, right? There was a recent example where a user had his hardware wallet, he had his 12 words, and he kept them offline, like in that hardware wallet. But then later what happened is he downloaded a fake app. He didn't know it was fake. It was malware, claiming to be Sparrow Wallet on the mobile. Now, Sparrow Wallet is a great desktop app. It's fantastic. But this was a fake malware or spy or scamware, basically, that said, hey, here's an iPhone app for Sparrow. Write in your 12 words. He entered his 12 words and then boom, it was gone because it was a scammer app. And so this is why basically if you listen to any reputable educator, all of them will tell you, never put your seed words into an online connected device for your life savings. Now, it's one thing if you've got like a phone wallet for small amounts, that's a different kettle of fish. But if we're talking about your life savings or a large amount of your savings, never put that into an online connected computer or device. Any other, I guess, key tips that you want to share for people?
So the other thing I mentioned is backups, and it's what he was touching on earlier on, that you don't have to have this in one place, right? You might have your keys inside a hardware wallet, and the hardware wallet is more like I don't want to confuse you even more, but it's more like a pen it's a pen for signing with the secret rather than a place to store the seed. You can also have backups, and you could have many, many, many of these backups. So another thing in your journey that will make you feel extremely confident is when you do lose a backup and you realize, I can just go and get the other one from behind my parents' house or wherever and restore the same wallet again on a whole new device or a different wallet or something, and realize that you are independent even from losing these backups. This is something you can't do with anything else, really. Yeah.
The other thing you can do with your backups is rather than just have them written down on a piece of paper, think about what might happen if there's a fire or a flood or something like that. And so there are many products now in the Bitcoin world. In fact, there's even DIY solutions that make it very simple to stamp these seed words into things like a stack of stainless steel washers that can be then screwed together on a bolt, and you can store that, so you can have it that way, or things like seed plates.
Like a seed plate where it's like a metal thing that you stamp.
The idea being is it's essentially indestructible should your house burn down. It's bad enough having that happen than to lose your life savings as well.
Yeah. And so then, I guess that's we've covered, let's say, some of the basic ideas of it. Now, we're not going to get into the deep technicals of multisig, but maybe just give an overview on that for people, because I think that can also offer, let's say, the next level for people who are storing larger amounts, or perhaps they have a business use case for multisig. So could you just give us a quick overview on multisig and how hardware wallets can also play into that?
Yeah. So the basic concept that we've talked about is using a seed phrase, which is a private key, to sign a transaction. But you can build your addresses such that you don't need just one to spend. You could build it so that you need to sign with, say, 2 keys out of a total of 3. And this gives you some redundancy. This means that if you were to lose one of those keys, you can still recover all of your Bitcoin. It's a similar thing to the backup, but this also allows you to separate how you store these keys, maybe in different places around the world. If you've got lots and lots of Bitcoin, maybe you want some to live in a different continent or something. This is more advanced stuff, but there's lots further you can go with Bitcoin than just the basic, one key seed phrase.
So as I touched on earlier, if you've got your life savings in Bitcoin, you shouldn't be able to spend your life savings in one hit. It should be difficult, so that it also is difficult for anyone who might seek to take your life savings from you. Now, just like with hardware wallets themselves, and just like perhaps once personal key management was difficult, it's up until this point been considered quite difficult to do multi-signature, like was just described there. But there is, it's something that we're quite proud of. It's emerged at, in fact, the Bitcoin community in Australia. There are now hardware wallets. It's called Frostnap, actually. You may want to look them up. I don't have any financial affiliation with them whatsoever. It's just something that's emerged from our community. We're naturally proud of any of those things that happen. But these are hardware wallets that link together. They start off linked together. So if you're going to do something like, let's say, a 2 of 3 multi-signature, so you need to sign 2 keys out of any possible 3 in order to spend the money, you would start off with the 3 hardware wallets essentially daisy-chained together, all plugged in together, and you set them up in one go. And once you've set that up, you can then geographically separate the 3 wallets. So perhaps you might leave one with, you'd have one, and you could have one with, your family lawyer or something like that, and another one with with somebody else. By the way, it's not just 2 of 3. You could have 3 of 4 or 2 of 5. M of N is how it's described. And you could use these Frostnap wallets just depending on what the N is how many wallets you need. And you can create from that any scheme you want. And if you want to spend, you bring the appropriate number of wallets back together and can spend the money. So it can vastly simplify this whole process.
Yeah. And I'll just point out as well, for people who are kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed, there are also providers. They might help you coach. Either they might hold 1 key in your multisig quorum, or they might hold 0 keys and they just coach you through, like they're a consulting service. So there are some consulting services and guidance who will kind of help you with that if you're dealing with larger amounts, or they may hold 1 of the keys and still you hold the majority of the keys in that quorum, something like this. So these are different ways that people can manage with that. But I guess we've got the last 2 minutes now, so let's just kind of give kind of actionable items for people. So if you have coins on an exchange or with a custodian, what are the kind of key action items that you would give? Maybe start with a small amount on a phone wallet. Any recommendations you would give? Take, about 30 seconds, 40 seconds each.
I would remind you that you don't have to put all of your money into any particular setup. So if you haven't done anything before and everything lives on the exchange, then make it a project for the weekend or something to go and find yourself a phone wallet. We make one, it's called Envoy, that you're welcome to use, it's free. It's fully open source as well. And put a little bit of money on there. Withdraw a little bit from the exchange and, some amount that you don't mind even if you were to lose it, so that you have an opportunity to practice. You can try it out, you can get the experience of looking at a seed phrase, saving a seed phrase, deleting it, restoring it, and build yourself some confidence with how to do it, just like how you would have training wheels on a bike as you start to ride it or something. You don't have to move everything today. Start a little bit and you'll build your confidence over time. Yeah,
that's pretty much it. I mean, the coins that you might hold in your hot phone wallet, it's just like the equivalent of the money that you hold in a traditional, cash wallet. But then a greater amount then is held in a more secure wallet. There's, do we want to talk about would we mention particular brands of wallet?
Yeah, that's up to you. Yeah. We've got 40 seconds, so quick. Any phone, I guess, popular ones.
I was talking about more sort of the hardware wallets. What would you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sponsored by CoinKite, so I'm a fan of Coldcard, obviously. But look, any reputable hardware wallet. I'm happy for people to just use any well-known Bitcoin hardware wallet.
And just don't be intimidated. It's very simple. They just walk through the procedure. I mean, my octogenarian parents have got their Bitcoin on hardware wallets, so they can do it. Anyone in this room would have no problem handling that.
So I guess we'll leave it there. Your action item for those of you who have never taken self-custody: get a phone wallet. There are some online. Come and talk to us afterwards. Get a phone wallet and withdraw your coins from the exchange. That's our action item. I hope you've learned something from the session today. Please put your hands together for JP and Owen. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan.